Welcome to our Bible study this evening. We've reached a point where we're pretty much at the halfway point of Ezekiel. And if you know, we've been considering this topically. We've been skipping around with the chapters. And we've reached a point where we need to go back from chapters 1 to chapter 24 and review the chapters that we've skipped. So there's not really a topic for these chapters. I call this the variety chapters. But there are some points of application that we can gather from these different chapters. We'll begin with a word of prayer, and I'll call on Brother Justin, and he will pray for us.
Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for gathering us here. As we just go into your word, let's just gain knowledge, wisdom, and discernment, and overall grow closer to you and your name. Amen.
Amen. Now, every lecture thus far has been topical. We've addressed the opening vision and call of the prophet in chapters 1 to 3. Then we went through the enacted parables that took us through a number of chapters. Then we talked about his second vision, which was of the abominations of Jerusalem and the glory of the Lord departing from Jerusalem. And then we discussed the spoken parables. There were 6 of those which we categorized in groups of 2. In the course of taking the enacted and spoken parables, we skip from chapter to chapter, sometimes skipping over blocks of material in order to pick up more of the next time that we were discussing. That left some chapters untouched. We're now at the end of the first half of Ezekiel. Chapter 24 is the end of the first half. So we want to go back and touch all these areas we've not yet covered. There are many significant things in the first 24 chapters of Ezekiel. These were all things that took place in the first 6 years of Ezekiel's ministry, all prior to the fall of Jerusalem. Everything after chapter 24 was prophesied after the fall of Jerusalem. So it's a natural division for the book. The chapters we have not yet covered in the first half are chapters 6, chapter 7, chapter 13, chapter 14, chapter 18, and then chapters 20 through 22. We will not take all 8 chapters here verse by verse. So my intention is to go into each chapter and bring out what is unique and stands out as being notable. Chapter 6 is a prophecy to the mountains of Israel. Now notice what he says in verses 1 and 2. Kathleen, will you read it?
Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying. Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward the mountains of Israel, and prophesy against them.
Now, why were the mountains being prophesied against? Mountains have 2 possible significances. In one sense, mountains provide a natural defense. Before there were flying machines, mountains were the best defense of invasions that any nation could have. The mountains could refer to the defense mechanisms of Israel. As the prophecy that was being spoken of here was one of destruction. As such, Israel's defenses would basically be worthless and ineffectual, because there would be no defense against the judgment of God that would be coming. The other significance of mountains may be that among the hills and high places, there were shrines that had been built to Canaanite gods and goddesses. Now this was one of the reasons for the destruction that was coming against the nations, because there were idols being worshipped in the high places. And that was one of the major issues that God had with the nation of Israel. Symbolically, The mountains are listed as recipients of judgment. So it's either their defenses, or it's the fact that they were involved in idolatry, or it could be very well both. Verses 3, go on and read 3 through 7, Justin.
Say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of the sovereign Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to them. Hither, I'm about to bring a sword against you, and I will destroy your high places.
The shrines.
Your altars will be demolished, and your incense altars will be smashed. I will slay your people in front of your idols. Okay. I will lay the dead bodies of the Israelites in front of their idols, and I will scatter your bones around your altars. Whenever you live, the towns will be laid waste, and the high places demolished, so that your altars will be laid waste and devastated, your idols smashed and ruined, and your incense altars broken down, and we have made life out. Your people will fall slain among you, and you will know that I am the Lord.
Now this expression, and you shall know that I am the Lord, is the first expression, or I should say the first occurrence of this expression. This is the major theme of the book of Ezekiel. The nation shall know that I am the Lord. That's what the whole book, that's the theme of the book right there. God will demonstrate that He is the sovereign Lord. He is the King. And He will show this by these graphic demonstrations of His judgment. This expression, and you shall know that I am the Lord, or the nations shall know that I am the Lord, it occurs 70 times in the book of Ezekiel. This is the first time it occurs. All right, Kathleen, read verses 8 through 10.
Yet I will leave a remnant, so that you may have some who escape the sword among the nations, when you are scattered through the countries. Then those of you who escape will remember me among the nations, where they are carried captive, because I was crushed by their adulterous heart, which has departed from me, and by their eyes which play the harlot after their idols. They will loathe themselves for the evils which they committed in all their abominations. And they shall know that I am the Lord. I have not said in vain that I would bring this calamity upon them.
Now, God, through the prophets, had warned the people many times that He was going to send judgment. But it had not come as quickly as the people thought that it might. They thought He said this in vain, that He was giving an idle threat. Kind of like a parent who is constantly saying, I'm going to slap you, I'm going to ground you, I'm going to this, I'm going to that. And they say it every time the kid acts up, but they never do anything. That's why when you say it, the kid doesn't respond. They're like, Mom, Dad's not going to do anything. Right? That's how they kind of thought God, because all these prophets had said this over and over and over again. For years and years and years, they thought it was an idle threat. But what God is saying, and what Kathleen read here, is this is not an idle threat. When I bring this judgment, you're going to know it was not in vain. Yeah, exactly. But in this, you notice how he started this little paragraph out. He said, I will leave a remnant. He's putting a light spot in a dark place. You're not going to be 100% gone, because I'm leaving a remnant. What we see here is reminiscent of many of the prophets. Isaiah develops this concept the most, actually. We already considered the book of Isaiah. We recall that the remnant here, in the natural understanding of this prophecy, was the Jews in Babylon, who turned from their idolatry and received the chastening, and they were able to return back to Jerusalem at the end of their captivity 70 years later. They come and they help rebuild the waste. And when they come, they have a new heart, a new spirit, a new attitude toward God. And they no longer go after the idols after this happens. The remnant in the natural can refer to this situation that we've been discussing here. But we also know that the concept of remnant was also a technical term for those who come under the new covenant and receive His Spirit under the leadership of the new David, the Messiah, which is Jesus Christ. So there's also a secondary fulfillment of this, if not a primary one, and that be in Jesus. All right, verses 11 and 12. I believe it's back to Justin.
This is what the sovereign Lord says. Strike your hands together and stand your feet and cry out, alas, because of all the wicked and detestable practice of the house of Israel, for they will fall by the sword, famine, and plague. He that is far away will die of the plague, and he that is near will fall by the sword, and he that survives and is spared will die of famine. So I will spend my wrath upon them.
Okay, it's interesting here, whether you are near or far from Jerusalem, whether you're near, whether you're far, you are not going to escape the judgment of its abominations. Remember, we talked about this. There was a class of people who thought Jerusalem was the Calvary. It was where the holy people were. And the ones who were still in Babylon, or the ones who were still in Jerusalem, while the others had been already put into captivity in Babylon, they thought they were spared. They thought they were good. There's no way anything's going to happen to us because we're in Jerusalem. But what is being said here is it doesn't matter if you're close to Jerusalem, if you're in Jerusalem, or if you're far from Jerusalem. When my judgment comes, you who are not the remnant are going to receive it. You're going to receive it. If you are in the city, you fall. If you're outside, Babylon's swords will still find you. Pestilence will still get you. There's not going to be any safety anywhere when that judgment comes. Kind of reminds me of what was said of Jerusalem in Revelation, where the people, when Rome came on Jerusalem, they were, oh, let the mountains fall all over us. And, if we're under the mountain, we'll be protected. Did they not realize that the fact that the mountain fell on them, that's probably how God was going to kill them? Did they not understand that when God makes a judgment, that was there anybody other than 8 people that was spared when God brought judgment at the flood? Was there anybody but Lot and his 2 daughters that was spared when God brought destruction and judgment on Sodom? Everybody, when God brings judgment, it's complete. And that's basically what's being said here. Kathleen, read verses 13 and 14.
Then you shall know that I am the Lord, when their slain are among their idols, all around their altars, on every high hill, on all the mountaintops, under every green tree, and under every thick oak, wherever they offered sweet incense to all their idols. So I will stretch out my hand against them and make the land desolate. Yes, more desolate than the wilderness toward Diblah. In all their dwelling places, then they shall know that I am the Lord.
See, their altars were under the green trees and every oak and every grove that there was. They were worshiping idols. Where the idols stand now, there will be dead bodies. What's being said here? Justin?
I just want to add right here, notice that that Israel isn't just a place that if you look at it right here, it says, no matter where you are, nation of Israel, I will cast my judgment on you. And it goes to show that it's just not in one place. And that is, Israel is a people.
Right, exactly. Since the prophecy opened up being a prophecy against the mountains, the bottom line is he's going to make the land desolate. They're done. Now, this was the first time they were done. We already studied through Daniel, through Revelation, that the second time they were done. The only reason they weren't done the first time, anybody want to take a guess why? The Messiah had come yet. The only reason they were restored, the only reason he had a remnant, the only reason, Jesus hadn't come yet. But when it happened the second time, Jesus had already come and went and was already doing his thing in heaven. So there wasn't going to be another after this. It was complete. Now, in another sense, the land was benefited by the absence of its inhabitants when this happened. In 2 Chronicles, it said that by the Jews going out of Babylon for 70 years, the land of Israel finally observed its Sabbaths. Every 7 years, the land was supposed to remain empty to recover its nutrients. The Jews never observed that, and when they were taken into Babylon for 70 years, the land was able to enjoy its Sabbaths. In another sense, the land suffered a judgment in that it was fruitless all those years. So there's several different ways of looking at this. Now, let's move over to chapter 7. Justin, if you will, read verses 1 through 7, and Kathleen, read verses 8 through 14.
The word of the Lord. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says to the land of Israel. The end has come upon the four corners of the land. The end is now upon you, and I will release my anger against you. I will judge you according to your conduct and repay you for all your detestable practices. I will not look on you with pity or spare you. I will surely repay you for your conduct and the detestable practices among you. Then you will know that I am the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Disaster, an unheard of disaster is coming. The end has come. The end has come. It has roused itself against you. It has come. And doom has come upon you, you who dwell in the land. The time has come. The day is near. There is pain, not joy upon the mountains.
8 through 14.
Now upon you I will soon pour out my fury and spend my anger upon you. I will judge you according to your ways, and I will repay you for all your abominations. My eye will not spare, nor will I have pity. I will repay you according to your ways, and your abominations will be in your midst. Then you shall know that I am the Lord who strikes. Behold the day, behold it has come. Doom has gone out. The rod has blossomed. Pride has budded. Violence has risen up into a rod of wickedness. None of them shall remain, none of their multitude, none of them, nor shall there be wailing for them. The time has come, the day draws near. Let not the buyer rejoice, nor the seller mourn, for wrath is on their whole multitude. For the seller shall not return to what has been sold, though he may still be alive. For the vision concerns the whole multitude, and shall not turn back. No one will strengthen himself who lives in iniquity. They have blown the trumpet and made everyone ready, but no one goes to battle. For my wrath is is on all their multitude.
Now, if you notice with what Kathleen just read, it keeps speaking of the multitude. In verse 11, it talked about how the destruction will be so widespread, there will be no one left to mourn the dead. Because the ones who would normally mourn the dead would also be dead, wiped out. In verses 12 to 13, it talks about that the buyers would not rejoice over the loss of the seller. As things were falling apart, people would need cash. So they would sell off their properties very cheap. All right? So the ones that still had a lot of cash flow was buying up these profits, or I should say these properties, which was going to be, they think, their profits. Because they're buying these properties real cheap. You know, normally in a devastating thing like what happened in the United States with the mortgage industry back in 2008, there were a lot of people who went under and failed. But the people who already had old money racked up well. Because they came in and bought up just, stacks of properties. And when the economy began to be fixed a few years later, they doubled their wealth, they tripled their wealth. So normally in a market like that, if you got the money, you're rejoicing. Oh, I got this wonderful still of a deal. But it's telling us here in verses 12 and 13, the buyers aren't going to be rejoicing because the one who purchased it, who thought they were getting a steal of a deal, in a short period of time, they're going to lose it too. And everything they had. No one was going to prosper from what was happening in this judgment. That's pretty much what it's saying here. All right. Verses 15 through 19. Let's read to 19. 15 to 19, and it's Justin's turn.
Outside is the sword, inside are the plagues and famine. Those in the country will die by the sword, and those in the city will be devoured by famine and plague. All who survive and escape will be in the mountains, moaning like doves of the valleys, each because of his sins. Every hand will go limp, and every knee will become as weak as water. They will put on sackcloth and be clothed in terror. Their faces will be covered with shame, and their heads will be shaved. They will throw their silver into the streets, and their gold will be an unclean thing. Their silver and gold will not be able to save them in the day of the Lord's wrath. They will not satisfy their hunger or fill their stomachs with it, for it has made them stumble into sin.
Okay, so there's several things here. In verse 15, inside and outside the city is going to be pestilence, disease, and war. Verse 17, every hand will be feeble, every knee will be as weak as water. There's not going to be any courage. Their courage is gone. And then here in verse 16, when it talks about the mourning, it says that the girded with sackcloth, horror will cover them, shame will be on their face. This is not talking about mourning the dead. It's talking about the mourning of repentance. Verse 16. Then in verse 18, he talks about the shame covering their faces. All right. At verse 19, their silver, their gold will not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. Some do trust their money to get through hard times. But in this situation, guess what? Well, there's not going to be anyone to pay off. The silver, the gold was used to make idols. Those idols will not be able to save them either. There will be no defense of the judgment of God when He brings them down. They will not get their soul satisfied in any way they look at it. When you're messing with God, there's no getting around it. There's no trying to figure out how am I going to get the upper hand of the deal. When it comes to God's judgment is God's judgment. And it's coming upon everybody. All right, verse 20. Kathleen, read 20. Let's see how many we've got here. How about read down to 22. 20 through 22.
As for the beauty of his ornaments, he set it in majesty, but they made from it the images of their abominations, their detestable things. Therefore I have made it like refuge to them.
Let me stop here real quick. This ornament that is talking about here is Jerusalem itself. God is putting a distance between the people and Jerusalem. You know what that distance was? When they were exiled to Babylon, was 1,000 miles away. 1,000 miles away. And that's what he's doing. Okay, verse 21 and 22, Kathleen.
I will give it as plunder into the hands of strangers, and to the wicked of the earth as spoil, and they shall defile it. I will turn my face from them, and they will defile my secret place, for robbers shall enter it and defile it.
Okay. And Justin, if you will, read 23 through 27.
Prepare chains, because the land is full of bloodshed, and the city is full of violence. I'll bring the most wicked of the nations to take possession of their houses. I will put an end to the pride of the mighty, and their sanctuaries will be desecrated.
27.
When terror comes, they will seek peace, but there will be none. Calamity upon calamity will come, and rumor upon rumor. They will try to get a vision from the prophet. The teaching of the law by the priest will be lost, as the will of the council of the elders. The king will mourn, the prince will be clothed with despair, and the hands of the people of the land will tremble. I will deal with them according to their conduct, and by their own standards I will judge them. Then they will know that I am the Lord.
Okay, when it says in verse 23, I'll make a chain, I'm not sure what it meant. We know in Ezekiel had to be bound in chains in his house as a symbol of captivity. However, in this case, it would appear that the Lord is speaking. He's not speaking to Ezekiel, but Ezekiel is speaking to the people. So whether or not Ezekiel is saying to the people the same meaning of what the Lord said to Ezekiel, it's not actually known here. So I'm not sure what he's talking about. But in verse 26, we see reference to the prophet and the priest and the elder. Vision is associated with prophets. The law is associated with the priest. Wisdom is associated with who? The elders, the ancients. Right? So those were the three ordinary ways that God spoke to his people. I don't know if you realize that or not. One was the law. That was the most direct form. The priest had the duty to teach the law. If the people knew the law, they would have the best guidance. In addition to that, there were prophets who had visions that they would give contemporary counsel in accordance to the law that would give the people what they needed in a particular current situation. And then there were the ancients, the wise, the elders of the area, the community, that had wisdom because of their old age and their life experiences. They had time in their lives to contemplate life's challenges, which qualified them to give counsel in the way their opinion matters. What he is saying is, all these means by which a person might seek guidance from God is going to be removed. You're being chastened. You're losing everything you had. But guess what? There's not going to be anything that you can turn to for comfort to understand, what am I going through? How am I going to get through this? What am I to expect next? There's no elders going to be available. There's no priests that are going to be available. There's going to be no prophets available for you. Justin?
Not to go off topic on that, but when it says preparedness, couldn't that mean that it's not about being prepared for the nations coming and overrule them?
Well, they're going to be all centralized in Babylon. So they're going to be captive. In the sense that they're captive, some of them were able in captivity to still have homes in Babylon. So, again, it could be, but it also, there's not really any there's nothing that really directly says what was meant here. I think what he's basically saying is, I think just the basic is, you're getting ready to be captive. You're going to lose everything that you know, everything that has been a comfort to you, everything that meant something to you, you're going to lose it. And in the midst of losing all of this and having all of this pain, you're not going to have God in any way to give you comfort. There's going to be no prophets. There's going to be no elders. There's going to be no priests. Now, I want you to think about your own life in times of struggle and pain that you may have gone through. A time of great loss in your life. Can you, knowing God, imagine what it would be like to experience that, and there is no Holy Spirit there to help you? How dark would that be? No hope, no presence of God, no feeling of His presence, no reassurances that yes, you're going through the fire, but you're going to be okay, you're going to come out as a victor. Not having any of that and going through those bad times of loss. That's why people in the world, when they go through these times, many of them commit suicide. Because they don't have God. They don't have God as their comforter, as their counselor, as their father, as their healer. They get so overwhelmed in the midst of what they're going through, they give up on life. It doesn't tell us anywhere in the Scriptures that I know of that any of the Jews did this. But it's possible that there might have been Jews during this time period who did commit suicide. It's possible. It's very possible. Out of, millions of people, it's very possible that somebody, at least one or two, or maybe 10 or 12, might have done that. We don't know. But it happens. But that's just something, that was part of their judgment. God said, you ignored me in all of your Sabbaths. You cheated on me with all your idols. You disregarded me. You disrespected me when I gave you everything. Your forefathers, I gave them manna, and I took care of them for 40 years in the wilderness, and I gave you a nation. I gave you a promised land that was flowing with milk and honey, and I did everything I could, bend over backwards, so that my force was behind your warriors, and you were able not to be taken captive by other nations. You won your battles. You prospered. Your kings had money. Your kingdom had finance. I gave it all to you. And this is how you're going to return your love? So I'm going to put you in exile. I'm going to put you in solitary confinement. Because you're not going to be able to have me for 70 years. I'm putting you in time out. Talking in a parental term, you're going to time out. And you're going to have to sit here and think about what you did. Well, that's exactly what happened. For 70 years, they had to think about what they did. And they didn't have the comfort of God's presence to get them through it. Now, that's just hard for me to imagine. No vision, no law, no wisdom. Amos said the same thing. In Amos chapter 8, verse 11, it said that the Lord will send a famine in the land, not one of bread for a thirst for water, but for the hearing of the word of the Lord. You remember that passage? If you want to read that, and you can find one of you can find it real quick. Amos chapter 8, verse 11. Remember, Amos was a contemporary prophet of Ezekiel. So he was pretty much saying this prophecy regarding the same people here. Amos chapter 8, verse 11.
The days are coming, declares the sovereign Lord, when I will send a famine through the land, not a famine of food or a thirst for water, but a famine of hearing the words of the Lord.
There have been believers, because of their faith, who over the years were in prison. And I'll never forget, I read a story of a believer who was going through persecution. He was put in solitary confinement. He was put in a cell. It was kind of like a room like this. It had tall ceilings in it. The jail cell had tall ceilings, like 20 feet high. But at the top, near the top of the ceiling, was just one little window, an open window. It didn't have glass. And that missionary who was being persecuted said, I was in solitary confinement for I think it was 15 years. The only thing that kept me sane was the patch of blue. What do you think he was talking about? God made sure he got put in a cell that had that little window at the top. And every day when he looked through that little window from far below, and he looked up, he saw that blue sky. He knew God was still there. And I'm sure it was in those moments that missionary, because that missionary was a missionary and no doubt was a student of the Word and knew God, knew the Bible, knew what was in the Bible. He didn't have a Bible to read, but everything that he knew, what do you think God did? He brought it back to his heart. It was those words that he knew from here that would come back into his brain, into his mind. That is what kept him going and kept him faithful. And finally, after 15 years, he was released and got his freedom back. Those Jews didn't have that. Because what did it say? Amos said, when they went into exile, it was going to be a famine. It wasn't going to be of food and water. There's going to be a famine. You're not going to be able to hear from the word of the Lord. The only other way I can explain that or even begin to fathom this would be pretty much they're going to be in hell. Because the only other place where there's no God would be hell. They were living hell on earth. So part of the judgment upon the northern kingdom that Amos was speaking of the northern kingdom, but what he was speaking of was that God would stop talking, stop bringing prophets. No one would be hearing from God anymore. And Ezekiel here is saying the same thing about the southern kingdom. God won't be speaking to the prophets, the priests, the elders anymore. And you know what's going to happen because of that? The kings are going to mourn. They're really going to mourn. Now we're going to skip over to chapter 13. This is a prophecy against the false prophets. There were many, many, many false prophets from within the Jews at this point. They were saying that judgment would not continue, even though there had been 2 deportations at this point. You know, right now, everybody, because of ICE, everybody's talking about being deported. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to get deported, right? Well, we're dealing with a story here of deportations. Babylon would come in and sweep up a whole slew of Jews and deport them to Babylon. And there had already been 2 deportations at this point. Several thousand Jews had been taken from Jerusalem to Babylon. And in Jerusalem and even in Babylon, there were some who were claiming to be prophets. They were speaking as if, I have a vision of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord. They were saying this was a temporary chastisement. Very soon God's going to vindicate us and we're going to be exiled. We're going to be taken out of exile and we're going to go back to our homelands and rejoice with our families. And that's what they were saying. They were prophesying peace to Jerusalem. But Ezekiel is saying that is not the word of the Lord. The word of the Lord is not prophesying peace to Jerusalem. The word of the Lord is not that Jerusalem is going to fall. Or I should say the word of the Lord is that Jerusalem is going to fall. That judgment is going to become more devastating than thus far, not less. And so Ezekiel speaks against these prophets. The expression false prophets is not an expression found in the Old Testament. You're not going to find that term anywhere in the Old Testament. The first expression of that false prophet term is found in the New Testament. Jesus said there would be false prophets and false Christs. And in the epistles and in Revelation, this expression is found. But the concept of a false prophet is found in the Old Testament. In Deuteronomy chapter 13, it warns against a prophet or a dreamer of dreams who tries to lead people away from God to worship other gods. The passage states that even if such a person performs a miracle or sign, they must not be listened to as they are seen as a test for the people's faithfulness. Such a person is to be put to death for advocating rebellion against God. 1 Kings chapter 22, a lying spirit was sent to the mouths of Ahab's prophets to deceive him and to lead him to his death. A judgment for his persistent rejection of God and to his word. After God asked which spirit would entice Ahab, the spirit offered to go and be a lying spirit in the mouths of all of Ahab's prophets. God then commanded the spirit to go and succeed in deceiving Ahab, which led the king to go into battle against Ramoth Gilead, where there the king was killed. The Bible in the Old Testament does not use the term false prophet, but it is clear that there were persons in the Jewish society who recognized people who claimed to be prophets. They were probably products of these prophetic schools that originated from the followers of Samuel, Elijah, Elisha. But at this time in history, they were rather degenerate. And while they had the label of prophet, they had job security where they claimed to be the counsel of God and with counsel of the king. This was their means of support. They were professional prophets. Just like today, there are professional pastors. When I use the word professional pastors, what do you think I'm talking about? The ones who are in it as a business. They go to school, they get the credentials, they get called by man to a ministry. They have a budget, they go through the perfunctory rituals of what they have to do every Sunday, and they collect a check and a salary. And that is their business. And when they get of a good ripe age, They retire, and they have a retirement. The only time that a prophet or a called individual in the Bible retired was when they closed their eyes and went to be with the Lord. When you're called for life. A pastor's call is kind of like a Supreme Court appointment. You're in it till you know, even if you can't do it, you still call, and you do what you can until you're not doing it anymore. And that generally is because you're either mentally out of it, you're under some kind of sedation, or because you've closed your eyes to go be with the Lord.
That's what I want to say too. With this, with these professional prophecies, but they can be paid whatever, they're to say whatever, too.
And that's the point, that's the exact point I'm making right now at this very moment. Because they were professional, they tended to say what people wanted to hear, not what they needed to hear. They only had a positive confession. They were what we call today possibility thinkers. Many today have similar agendas and speak contrary to Scripture. And they insist that negative talk is never to be indulged in or entertained. In fact, they're superstitious. If you say that might happen. Always be optimistic. Always think the best. Always confess only the positive and never the negative. You see this in some of the charismatic movements. That was basically the spirit of the prophets at the time of Ezekiel. Don't say Jerusalem is done. God's going to put us back there very soon. That's the cauldron. That's where all of the holiness is. He's not going to go anywhere else. He's not going to let Babylon have their way against him. This is only going to be temporary. Was I seeing your hand?
Oh yeah, I'd say something too. And when they do this too, they create a false sense of comfort for the populace. So when it goes in, you go in, you hear what you want to hear. Everything's going to be okay. You don't need to do nothing. And what that does is it makes people miserable.
That's right. And that's exactly what is happening right now in our country. Not speaking on the biblical part, but on the political part. People were promised a whole lot of things that they could have, and they wouldn't have to work for it, and they could come in and get everything that they would want and need and prosper, and this would be their land of opportunity. The only problem was they were achieving it off of the backs and off of the money of other people. And they thought that this would never end because there's no way that the voters would vote against them, or that the lawmakers would push it out. And now there's a rude awakening, because come January 1st, when that new bill is implemented, you're really going to see the effects of these changes, which that's what they've been fighting for over the last 2 months, trying to keep it and put it back in and prolong it and give it more time. But come January 1st, that's not going to happen. False sense of security. And that's exactly what was happening here. One of the reasons the prophets gave these confessions is people liked to hear them, and people supported them. You gave me a good prophet. Let me give you a couple denarii, or whatever the currency was for Babylon at that time. I know that was a Roman currency. But, let me give you, as they say, pesos or whatever you want, tuits. That was another currency. But they were supported. You like what you hear? Sometimes God has a negative word. Sometimes the truth is negative. not hate speech, just people hate to hear it. Many pastors today would never decry the sins of their congregations, knowing that it might affect their job security. But what I would be afraid of being a pastor is if a lot of the people under my, I won't say mine, it's the ones that I've been assigned to help take care of, that sounds better. If a lot of them end up going to hell, then there's a good chance I'm going to hell too. And I'm going to have to face it in hell. Why didn't you help me not be here? And why are you here? Because He's going to hold me accountable. He's going to hold those who take the lead in the church accountable for what they did not do. And if I end up going to hell because I didn't keep my family out of hell and keep the church out of hell, there's going to be a lot of mad people with me in hell one day. It is what it is, right? I would rather upset you and get you upset, and even to the point where you have to go to another church, because I know what's going to happen is eventually what I say is going to ring truth in your brain. And if you're saved because of what I said, one day it might be in heaven. You might thank me for it. I would rather do that than try to save face now and keep my job. Just
It says in the Bible, follow the truth will set you free. The truth is freedom. And we don't tell you the truth because we're angry or bitter. We tell the truth because we love you.
right.
And a lot of things that get mixed up in the church nowadays is that love does not equal acceptance.
Right.
You know, there's this false doctrine in the church that I love you and I'm going to accept you the way you are. That's not biblical. That's not true. We're not. So when we're in it, we're going to tell you the truth and tell you what's right because God loves you.
That's right. So you know what we're going to do? There is a lot of good information in this chapter. And I don't want to have to go through it very quickly and miss some of it. We're going to stop here. What we just talked about in the last 7 or 8 minutes is a preface to what we're going to consider here in chapter 13. Ezekiel is getting ready to go off on these false prophets. And that's what we're going to consider next. Now, next week is Thanksgiving Day. Are we going to be here in spirit, but in flesh? I hope I'm sitting down, relaxing after a big meal. There will be many people who will be gathered with their families. Many of the people who log in to watch it live will probably not be with us. So next week we'll not have a Bible study. But we will resume the week after that in chapter 13. And who knows, we might even review this little part that we just reviewed, that we just went over now before we preface it again. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, let's close with a word of prayer, Pastor Kathleen.
Father, we're thankful again for another night with you and studying your word. And we give you all the glory, all the praise, all the honor. And that which we are to glean from this book. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Amen.